All right, here's a reference to the code that we're going to be using in this tutorial. So this script is going to be attached to a bullet prefab, which has a rigid body on it. So the first variable we're going to need is going to be of type audio clip, and we're going to call it hit sound. Also make sure it's public so it shows up in the inspector, and we can drag and drop an audio clip file from our project folder into the audio clip variable. And then we have a float variable, which is how much force we need before it actually plays the sound. And then we create a void on collision enter, and we're going to have a variable called collision of type collision. And then we ask it if collision dot impulse, and impulse is basically the direction and speed that we hit something. And then we ask dot magnitude to get a float number of how big that vector 3 is. And then we ask it if it's bigger than hit sound force, which is the number up here of how much force we need to actually play the sound. Then we actually play the sound. So audio source dot play clip at point, the audio clip that we want to play, and then where in 3D space we want to play it. Alright, this tutorial is going to be really simple, but it's going to be kind of foundational of a lot of different things. First of all, we're going to learn how to use the function on collision enter so that we know when the ball has hit something. And in this tutorial, we're just going to add sound to the ball because that's super easy and simple, but we can also take this collision event, and in the same event that we add sound, we could also do something like check to see if the thing that we are hitting has a health bar, and if so, deplete damage from that health bar. And just lots of cool stuff like that. Or like maybe if it hits something hard enough, it creates a little explosion. The possibilities are really endless. And also, it's really good to jump into sound really early when you're starting video game design. I know I personally have a tendency to save that for the very end of game development, but it makes such a difference in making your game feel good and real. I'm just using a crappy sound effect that's just for demonstration purposes, but really spend a lot of time finding the right sound effects for your game and adjusting them. But actually, we're not going to get too deep into how to do sound effects in Unity. We're just using an audio clip as opposed to an audio source. An audio source has way more settings. You can adjust the 3D sound, you can adjust the volume, you can adjust the Doppler effect. There's a lot of really cool things you can do to make the sound in your game sound really, really good. So this is just a very beginning starting point to just playing a little sound clip when our ball hits something. And if you haven't already, please check out Jet Island on Steam. It has online co-op. It's a giant open world. You can swing around, fly through the air, slide up and down on hills on your hoverboard, and it's basically like a super giant open world alien skate park on another planet. It's a really, really unique experience, and it also has giant boss fights with all of this unique movement. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, let's now jump into the tutorial. All right, step one to actually making the bullets make a sound when they hit something is we need to have a sound to play. So I made a little dot wave audio file. I just smacked my fist against the microphone to make a little hit sound. But anyways, I saved that as a .wav file and I dragged and dropped it into my assets folder. You can also download a sound from something like freesounds.org. So everything we need to do this time is going to be in the bullet script. So let's go ahead and open that up. So the first thing we want is a variable in the inspector that is going to be the sound that we want to play. And there's a couple different ways of doing this, but I'm just going to do the absolute simplest way. So first of all, we're going to write public audio clip, and let's call this hit sound, just like that. Oops, I cannot type. There we go, and we're going to call it hit sound, and so that is going to be in the inspector. So let's go ahead and do that now and go back to Unity. So now if we click on our bullet prefab and then we scroll down to our bullet script, you can see that now we have a variable that is a hit sound, and we should be able to just drag and drop our test hit sound into there. So now we know what sound we're going to play. So now let's get back to the script. All right, now we need to know when we're actually going to play the sound, and we need to know when we are hitting something. So when you have a rigid body attached to your game object, you can write void on collision enter, and then if I hit enter, it automatically fills in everything you need. Writing the word private is optional. I personally like to leave that off because it just looks a little bit cleaner to me. So we have a void on collision enter, and this happens every single time that our sphere, or whatever rigid body that we're working with, every time it comes in contact with something else. And then we're going to have a variable that we can use inside of here. Just like when we're declaring a variable up here, it's going to be of type and then the name that we want to call it. So it's of type collision with a capital C, and we're going to call it collision with a lowercase c. So now inside of here, we can write collision, and then we can get a bunch of different information. Like we could get the game object that this collision collided with. In this case, we want to get something called the impulse, and that is basically a vector 3 of the direction that we hit it. So we're going to write dot impulse, but we just want to know how much we hit it, because we only want to play the sound when we hit something hard enough. So to convert a vector 3 into just knowing how big that vector 3 is, so if it's like, shooting forward like 0, 0, 1, or if it's shooting really, really fast like 0, 0, 100, we just want to know how big that vector 3 is. So we can write dot magnitude. So that's going to give us how big the impulse of the collision is. And let's put all of that inside of an if statement. And let's ask it if that number is larger than something. So let's actually create one more variable for ourselves, and let's call this public float, and let's call this hit sound force. And this will be the amount of force that we need in order to actually play the sound. This number doesn't have to be very big. Let's start with 1, and we can adjust it from there. If the sound is happening way too often, we can make this number bigger. If the sound isn't happening often enough, we can make this number smaller. So back down here to our if statement, we're asking, this is the number that's basically how strong our collision is, and we're going to ask it if it is bigger than hit sound force, then we are going to do something. And what we're going to do is audio source dot play clip at point. And then we need to give it where in 3D space and the audio clip that we want to play. So the clip is hit sound, that's this variable up here, and where we want to play it is at transform.position, so the current location of this bullet, and semicolon, and that should be all the code we need, and now we're ready to go test it. Alright, so we have our bullet selected, we scroll down, we want to make sure that we have our hit sound, and we can adjust this number up or down as we needed. I'm going to by default have it equal 1. And yeah, make sure that you have SteamVR running, and let's run the game. Alright, let's see if it makes the sound. It's totally making a slap sound when our bullets hit stuff. And sometimes it's going like if it's like hitting things multiple times. So in that case, we can adjust that number up and down until we get just the right amount of number of sounds that's hitting things the way we want it to. In addition to playing a sound, we could also instantiate a particle system, which would basically be like a little spray of dust or some debris or maybe a small explosion. So there's lots of things we can do using this stuff. And we can also make the sounds a lot more advanced. We could use an actual audio source where you can adjust things like the 3D spatial sound and the volume. We just used an audio clip and we said play clip at point, so it's a default just volume of 1, but we can get way more advanced into audio sources, so there's a lot of possibilities. All right, hopefully you found this tutorial helpful. In the future, we're going to dive a little bit deeper in how to do some cool sound effects. Maybe in the future, actually probably one of the next few things we'll do is add particle effects like a muzzle flash or debris flying up in the air or a little explosion when the bullet hits something. Also having the ball take away health from an enemy and learn how to make some really simple, super basic enemies that we can build on and make more and more complicated and do some pretty cool stuff. So that is some of the things that we're going to do next. Also, might do a Patreon in the future. Please help me out with the algorithm and check out my main channel where I am creating a game kind of like Jet Island, but with super cool, realistic photogrammetry graphics where I take actual animal bones that I found out in nature and I kind of painted them and made them look all dirty and gross and made them into giant monsters and did photogrammetry graphics of that. So it is really dark and spooky, and that doesn't even describe it very well. It's going to be something interesting. We'll see where this game goes. I've been working on it for a little while now. So yeah, if you want to check that out on my main channel. So until my next video, I'll see you later and keep making games.